The salty air of the Florida coast usually carries a sense of freedom and promise, a sentiment that 41-year-old Isabella Hellman knew intimately. She had spent years chasing the scent of that promise, traveling from her roots in Colombia to the sun-drenched boulevards of Delray Beach, where she meticulously constructed the life she had always dreamed of. Isabella wasn't just surviving in America. She was thriving. As a successful real estate agent at Signature Real Estate, she became a beacon of warmth in her community. Known for a smile that could light up a room and an outgoing spirit that drew people in, she had conquered the professional world, securing a beautiful condominium on Anada Drive and earning the respect of her peers. But her true masterpiece, her proudest achievement, wasn't a property or a commission check. It was her 10-month-old daughter, Emelia. To Isabella, Emelia was the sun around which her entire universe orbited, a pure, radiant joy that validated every sacrifice she had ever made. Her family described her as a woman devoted to the happiness of others, a nurturer by nature, whose transition from bank teller to real estate superstar was driven by a relentless desire to provide a better life for her child. Ben Shacker, her broker, remembered the day she walked into his office with that signature drive. She was working as a bank teller then, but she saw him in a company shirt and didn't hesitate to approach him. Her eyes set on a horizon far beyond the bank counter. She had that gift, that rare ability to connect with people instantly, to make them feel seen and understood, a trait that made her a natural in the cutthroat world of real estate. In just 16 months, she had proven she had the grit to succeed. But beneath the shimmering surface of her success, Isabella carried the quiet anxiety of a single mother working tirelessly to secure a future for her child. Her family, her anchor, lived nearby in Boca Raton. Her parents Eduardo and Amparo and her 3 sisters, Diana, Elizabeth, and Adriana. They were a tight-knit unit, a Colombian enclave in Florida, holding on to their traditions while embracing their new American identity, gathering frequently for meals that were loud with laughter and love. Amparo, Isabella's mother, was the rock she relied on, often stepping in to care for baby Emelia while Isabella worked, providing the kind of support system that allowed Isabella to breathe a little easier. But even with this fortress of love around her, Isabella was lonely, and in 2014 she met Louis Bennett. Louis Richard Bennett seemed, on paper, to be the perfect complement to Isabella's vibrant energy. He was a 42-year-old mining engineer with an air of rugged sophistication, possessing dual citizenship in Australia and the United Kingdom. Originally from Dorset, England, Bennett carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen the world. He was an experienced sailor, holding a Royal Yachting Association Coastal Skipper certification, a qualification that signaled competence and mastery over the unpredictable sea. His training included intricate emergency procedures, maneuverboard protocols, and night sailing safety skills, expertise that one would assume makes a person a guardian, a protector. He had even completed a grueling 3-month voyage from St. Martin to Australia, a feat that spoke to his endurance and capability. When their paths crossed, the chemistry was immediate, and the relationship moved with a dizzying velocity. By July 2016, they welcomed their daughter Emelia into the world, and by February 2017, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony. From the outside looking in, it was a picture of domestic blister, a successful real estate agent and the worldly adventurer starting a chapter together. But the lens through which the public viewed their life was fuzzy. The reality was sharp, cold, and fractured. Beneath the veneer of the happy marriage, cracks were rapidly spreading through the foundation of their life together. Isabella's family would later reveal that the couple was drowning under a relentless tide of financial pressure. They were shackled by over $2,500 in various debts, constantly juggling credit card payments and struggling to keep their heads above water. But the money was just the tip of the iceberg. The true chasm between them was ideological. Louis Bennett wanted to transplant their life to Australia, near his family and his business interests, tearing Emelia away from the only home she had ever known and the support system Isabella had built. Isabella was adamant, her roots in Florida running too deep to be uprooted. She would not leave her family. She would not leave her life. This tension wasn't whispered. It was screamed in text messages that investigators would later recover, digital echoes of a relationship unraveling. In one frantic message, Isabella wrote to Bennett, "You make me crazy," shouting, yelling, swearing in another. The exhaustion dripped from her words. "I am tired of you telling me I am the most worst person you ever met before. Everything I do, it's wrong. This is very pathetic, Louis." She was trapped in a cycle of criticism and control, feeling small in the presence of the man who was supposed to be her partner. Despite the rising storm clouds of their marital strife, or perhaps in a desperate attempt to sail through them, the couple decided to take a belated honeymoon in April 2017. In a move that now feels heartbreakingly ominous, They left 10-month-old Emelia in the safety and care of Isabella's family in Florida. They flew to St. Martin in the Caribbean, boarding Bennett's 37-foot catamaran, the surf into summer. The itinerary was ambitious and adventurous. Sail through Puerto Rico, onto Cuba, and then make the final leg back to Key West, Florida. Isabella, despite the misery that had permeated her recent months, tried to find excitement in the voyage. Her sister Diana recalled that Isabella was looking forward to the adventure, that spark of resilience still glowing within her, though she ached to be away from her baby. They had promised to stay in regular contact, a lifeline to home via a satellite phone. But almost immediately, the line began to fray. Isabella's personal mobile phone broke early in the trip, leaving her entirely dependent on Lewis for communication. It was a dependency that would prove fatal. What investigators would later find deeply suspicious was that Bennett did not activate the satellite phone or register his personal locator beacon until they reached Cuba, right before the final, most dangerous leg of their journey. It was as if he was ensuring his own survival while keeping his wife invisible to the rest of the world, a silence that would later be interpreted by the FBI as a calculated step to ensure his own rescue, after he executed his plan to murder his wife. The days that followed were a mixture of Caribbean beauty and creeping dread. Isabella called her sister whenever she could, her voice usually filled with detailed questions about Emelia's feeding, her sleeping, her smiles. But then, the tone shifted. During one of the final calls, Isabella seemed distant, distracted. The frantic maternal inquisition was gone. She didn't ask her usual questions. The conversation felt rushed, clipped, as if she was being monitored or was afraid. On the 14th of May 2017, the couple departed Havana, Cuba, bound for the final stretch home to Florida. At 8:25 that evening, Isabella called her sister Diana via the satellite phone. "We just connected the phone," Isabella told her, her voice perhaps holding a trace of relief or maybe just urgency. "It's been really hard for us to connect it." She explained they had left Cuba and were in the middle of the vast, different ocean. They were isolated, alone on the water. Her last words to her sister were words of casual reassurance. "I'll see you tomorrow." It was a phrase spoken millions of times a day, a promise of a future that would never arrive. It would be the last time anyone ever heard Isabella's voice. According to Lewis Bennett, the timeline that followed was a tragedy of errors, a catastrophic accident. He told investigators that around 8 p.m. on the 14th of May, he asked Isabella to take control of the catamaran for the night watch while he went below deck to sleep. He claimed that despite Isabella's limited sailing experience, she was a real estate agent, not a sailor, and, despite the fact that she had absolutely no training in emergency sailing procedures, he did not require her to wear a life jacket. He did not ask her to clip on a safety harness. He did not give her a personal locator beacon. He left a novice alone at the helm of a 37-foot boat in the open ocean at night. In the early morning hours of May 15th, Bennett claimed he was awakened by a loud crashing underneath the hull. When he climbed to the deck, he painted a scene of chaos. The sails were loose, the rigging was flailing, and the helm was unmanned. Isabella was gone, vanished into the dark water. But what Bennett did next, or rather, what he failed to do, would scream his guilt louder than any confession ever could. By his own admission, Lewis Bennett could not even recall if he called out for his missing wife, his partner, the mother of his child. He did not deploy parachute flares to illuminate the dark water, a basic procedure for any search at night. He did not turn the catamaran around to search. He did not use the attached dinghy to scan the waves for her. He did not immediately activate the emergency equipment. He did not use the satellite phone to call for help. Instead, in a display of cold, calculated priority, Bennett spent approximately 45 minutes loading items onto the life raft. He wasn't scrambling for a life preserver. He was packing. Among these items were a suitcase, 2 duffel bags, a backpack, 14 gallons of water, unexpended parachute flares, a radio transmitter, food, a tea set, and, most tellingly, at 1:30 a.m. on the 15th of May, the U.S. Coast Guard received the emergency signals from Bennett, Best's personal locator beacon approximately 26 nautical miles west of Key Bank in the Bahamas. By 4:30 a.m., a Coast Guard helicopter located Bennett floating calmly in his life raft and transported him to the Marathon Jet Center in the Florida Keys. The rescue swimmer who assisted Bennett noted immediately that his backpack was unusually heavy. It contained the stolen coins, the silent witnesses that would lead to his first arrest. When Coast Guard officials, dripping with sweat and adrenaline from the rescue, asked Bennett what he had done to search for his wife, his answer was chilling in its apathy. "I did not do anything. He simply watched her go, packed his bags, and left." Bennett later called Isabella's sister, leaving a voicemail about the disappearance that was devoid of emotion, and contacted a friend in Australia to help alert authorities. but his behavior from the very beginning struck everyone who encountered him as profoundly wrong. He appeared calm, composed, even annoyed. He showed none of the panic, the despair, the wild-eyed desperation one would expect from a man who had just watched his wife fall into the ocean. The Coast Guard, however, sprang into action, launching one of the most extensive search and rescue operations in the region's history. For 4 grueling days, from the 15th to the 18th of May, they scoured the ocean, searching over 4,980 square nautical miles. They used 4 different types of aircraft and 3 Coast Guard cutters, burning fuel and manpower in a desperate bid to find Isabella. The operation lasted 137 hours and covered an area larger than some small countries, a massive effort that ultimately came up empty. The ocean had swallowed her whole, or perhaps it had simply been allowed to take her. On the 18th of May, at 8:45 p.m., with heavy hearts, the Coast Guard was forced to suspend the search. But just 1 day later, while Isabella's family was still clinging to a shred of hope, Bennett made a request that turned the stomachs of the investigators. He asked the Coast Guard for a letter of presumed death for Isabella. Commander Luke Persiak had to tell Bennett that the Coast Guard was not authorized to issue such letters, but the timing was damning. As one FBI agent noted, it was extremely early for a husband to be seeking a death certificate. Most men would be tearing the world apart looking for their wife. Bennett was already trying to close the book on her life. Isabella's disappearance shattered her family. Her parents, her sisters, and baby Emelia had been anxiously awaiting her return, expecting a suntanned mother with stories of the high seas. Instead, they were delivered the news that she was missing. Yet, in their grief, they rallied around Bennett, offering him their support, their comfort, assuming he was suffering as much as they were. But their compassion was met with a cold, impenetrable wall. Isabella's sister Diana described the moment she first saw Bennett after the search was called off. It wasn't a meeting of 2 grieving souls, it was a confrontation with a stranger. Bennett was calm. He wasn't crying, there were no tears. When Diana saw him, she ran to him and hugged him, her voice cracking with desperation. "Where is Isabella?" she begged, and he looked at her and said, with terrifying indifference, "I don't know." 2 weeks later, on May 28, 2017, Bennett arrived at the family. Aspoka returned home with a police officer to retrieve his belongings: a laptop, an iPad, an engagement ring, and other items, alleging that the family had taken them. What happened next was a 9-minute masterclass in psychopathy captured on the officer's body camera. The footage shows a heartbreaking confrontation between a family drowning in grief and the man they were beginning to realize had killed their beloved Isabella. In the video, Isabella's mother can be seen pleading with Bennett, her hands clasped in prayer, begging him not to take baby Emelia away from them. Bennett had placed Emelia in his car and was preparing to leave the country, severing the only link Isabella had left to the world. Isabella's sister, Elizabeth, overcome by the sheer weight of the loss and the rising tide of suspicion, finally snapped. She screamed at Bennett, her voice raw with pain. "You already killed my sister," she shouted, the accusation hanging in the humid Florida air. "What else do you want now? You want to kill my mom. That is what you want now." The realization hit them all like a physical blow. At one point, Isabella's mother collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by the horror that she might never see her granddaughter again. The police officer, witnessing this raw agony, did what he could to humanize the situation, suggesting to Bennett that he allowed the grandmother to hold the baby one more time. Bennett looked at the grieving woman on the ground and refused. "I don't think that's right," he said coldly, before getting into his car and driving away, taking Emelia with him. The very next day, Bennett purchased one-way tickets to the United Kingdom and fled, effectively kidnapping his daughter and cutting off all contact with Isabella's family, while the Hellman family struggled to navigate a world without Isabella. Terrified for Emelia, law enforcement agencies were working tirelessly to uncover the truth. The FBI Miami field office, working in tandem with the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service, had located the partially sunken catamaran during the search. They hauled it up, and what they found contradicted Bennett's story of a tragic collision. The boat, it seemed, had a story of its own. Coast Guard experts who examined the photographs and video of the vessel made a startling discovery. The damage to the catamaran appeared to have been inflicted from the inside the boat, not from an external collision with debris or a shipping container. There were holes in both hulls in nearly identical locations, and 2 underwater escape hatches had been found open. Opening those hatches while the boat is in the water is like punching a hole in a submarine. It causes rapid, catastrophic flooding. An associate professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy was brought in to analyze the evidence. He studied the fractures, the angles, the flooding patterns. His conclusion was unequivocal. Based on the analysis, he stated, It does not appear the vessel's sinking was caused by accidental damage. Rather, it appears the vessel was intentionally scuttled. The expert explained that the opening of both escape hatches was unexplainable as an accident. It defies prudent seamanship. He testified that he could not think of any item floating in the ocean that would accidentally cause similar holes in both hulls at roughly the same time. This wasn't a mishap, it was a demolition job. Lewis Bennett had sunk his own boat with his wife on it, just as he had filed a false police report about a burglary on a yacht named Kitty R in St. Martin back in May 2016. He had stolen $100,000 worth of gold and silver from that yacht while working as crew. And he had brought those coins, including the ones found in his heavy backpack, onto the catamaran with Isabella. The sinking wasn't an accident of navigation. It was a disposal method. On June 16, 2017, exactly 1 month after Isabella's disappearance, the FBI executed a search warrant at the couple's Delray Beach condominium. It was a scene out of a heist movie. Approximately 20 FBI agents spent 8.5 hours tearing the property apart, looking for the rest of the stash. They emerged with evidence bags containing various items hidden in boat shoes in the master bedroom closet. It painted a picture of a man who viewed people as obstacles and objects as currency. For the investigators, Bennett's motives crystallized with terrifying clarity. Killing Isabella would solve his marital problems instantly. It would end their arguments about money and location. It would likely allow him to inherit her estate, and most importantly, it would give him sole custody of Emelia, a ticket to raise her wherever he chose, far away from the people who knew the truth. But the physics of the sinking and the weight of his own greed betrayed him. When Bennett returned to the United States on August 29, 2017, for what he thought was a routine insurance interview regarding the boat, the FBI was waiting for him. They arrested him on the spot. He initially pleaded guilty to transporting stolen goods to coins and received 7 months in prison. But that was just the holding pattern. The murder case was being built, brick by brick, around him. On February 20, 2018, the FBI arrested Bennett on second-degree murder charges. FBI Special Agent James Kelly wrote in the affidavit, "I respectfully submit that there is probable cause to believe that Lewis Richard Bennett knowingly and unlawfully killed Isabella Hellman with malice aforethought. The evidence was overwhelming. Expert analysis proved the catamaran was deliberately scuttled. As the trial date approached and the weight of the evidence against him became undeniable, Bennett's legal team began to negotiate. On November 5, 2018, Bennett changed his plea. In a move that devastated Isabella's family, he agreed to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter instead of murder. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Isabella's family opposed the deal vehemently, believing in their hearts that Bennett had deliberately, cold-bloodedly murdered their daughter. But prosecutors cited the immense challenges of proving premeditated murder on the high seas, where there are no eyewitnesses, and the primary evidence is at the bottom of the ocean. With the plea deal, Bennett now faced a maximum of 8 years in prison instead of the life sentence he deserved. On May 28, 2019, Lewis Bennett appeared before U.S. District Judge Federico Moreno in a final display of arrogance. Bennett read a prepared apology. "I know they have been through unimaginable pain as a result of my actions, and for that I am truly sorry," he said, his voice devoid of the sincerity Isabella's family needed. He actually had the audacity to ask for 7 years instead of 8 so he could be reunited sooner with Emelia. Judge Moreno was unmoved. He looked down at the man who had shown such indifference to human life and sentenced him to the maximum 8 years in federal prison. Judge Moreno encouraged cooperation between the families regarding Emelia, knowing the child was the ultimate victim in this nightmare. In June 2019, a small measure of healing began. Isabella's family traveled all the way to Edinburgh, Scotland, to see Emelia for the first time since she was 10 months old. The reunion was emotional, a collision of grief and love.